Hello and welcome to our Healthcare Science T-level recording on academic reading and writing in the healthcare science sector. So first of all, we'd just like to begin with a little bit of a disclaimer. So all information provided is correct as of recording of April 23 and may not reflect future changes to guidance documents. So please always review the most up-to-date guidance. My name is Tracy, and I'm also joined with Marina. We are the Provider Development Officers with NCFE, and our role is to support our providers through CPD, such as workshops, webinars, face to face events, and bite sized recordings like this. So, I come from teaching in FE, teaching health and social care. And what I've done is I've really explored how to incorporate what I've learned as a teacher over the last few years and how to apply that to T levels to really support our providers in that teaching and delivery of the T level.
And hello, my name is Marina, and I am also Provider Development Officer on the Health and Science T-level. So my background is in science. I have a PhD in neuroscience with a medical research focus. So a lot of experience of applying those difficult science concepts to health, but also my teaching experience is science and maths. We're focusing today on some of those academic skills, delivering those kind of difficult skills in context. The aims of today's recording are to support you in developing the academic skills in your students, the ones that they need in order to succeed and excel in their chosen discipline. We'll be going here beyond just the T-level. By the end of the session, we hope that you'll be able to evaluate the academic skills required for higher level study, considering strategies that could support the students' academic skills, communication skills, critical thinking skills, and analyse the reading, writing, speaking and listening skills required for maximum success in the specialist area. We're going to start today with Florence. Florence is a T-level student doing healthcare science. So she's really interested in neurology, neurological diseases, and she wants a career in neurophysiology. So where's Flo now on her career journey? Well, she's just starting the T-level. Her experience is she's got some exam skills, she's done her GCSEs, but limited in critical thinking. She also has limited to no engagement with employers and professional communications. Looking at her next steps, what does Florence need to develop over the next 2 years to succeed in the T-level? Well, here skills that she is lacking and she needs support in would be professional skills, critical analysis, problem solving, summation and synthesis. So these two specifically, summation, synthesis and problem solving, come up in the assessments. These will be new types of assessments for her. The ESP, for example, something she's not encountered. Very important for her to be able to gather information from various parts that she has learned, from skills, knowledge, core content, occupational specialism content, and synthesize this to address the problem at hand. And then also highlighting and focusing on her communication skills. So how do you communicate to different audiences? For example, a patient or a peer, maybe a peer with experience in your field, maybe a peer who's not familiar with the language, and also a superior. And looking for her next step, she said she wants to go to uni. So what does her university course want from her? Here's an example from Middlesex University London, doing the Healthcare Science Neurophysiology Bachelor's Honours. So areas that they have highlighted on their enrolment are understanding of scientific principles, patient-centred care. There's a highlight of application and awareness of health and safety guidelines and working in a health and safe manner. Communication, team working. There's a highlight here of study skills. Physics and mathematical principles and mathematical skills. So these come up highlighted extra maths. These are things that they want as part of their entry requirements, but also that they'll develop in year one. This kind of range that we have. So in order to help Flo succeed and succeed on the next steps, we need to develop these skills. So how do we, what strategies do we have to develop? We need to look at developing her written and verbal communication. As we said, she's got limited experience in these, including communication to different audiences. Her ability for independent learning, problem solving, critical thinking, and her use of evidence-based research, so understanding scientific principles and applying that in practice. So first we'll look at developing the written communication. This is a key area for us to focus on, as in previous exams series, students have struggled in their written communication in the ESP as well as in the exams. So continuous formative assessment in this area will prepare students for these assessments. So understanding, for example, if we had essays and reports, how to structure the written work. So being able to link, justify, and evaluate, not just spitting bits of information. Including proofreading, checking for spelling and grammar errors. It's a key component. And then overall, how do they navigate improving our students' ability to time manage this in critical? So understanding planning the essay, time managing, writing it, then proofreading, and how do we balance this in our time? This is not just useful for the T-level, but when Florence goes into work, she will often have to maybe write an email or write a report under certain time constraints, understanding how to balance that time. With them moving in, we'd like our students to consider the audience. So who is it for? What's their level of technical language? Do they already have a background of understanding, or do we need to supply that background? And then understanding as well how to communicate in that professional manner. The language that you use for a patient is different to the language that you use for a peer, for example. Again, focusing on working in time constraints, so understanding, for example, presentations. The focus is delivering the information. It's not all about aesthetics. We know our students would love to spend time picking exactly the right colour. I have to admit, I also feel guilty of this, but this is focusing on actually the purpose of the presentation is conveying information. I'd also like to highlight references. This is another one that was often done poorly by students in their assessments. Understanding the purpose of referencing, how to reference appropriately and consistently, and using these to support their work to justify what they're saying. Now going into developing the verbal communication skills. So we want to not only develop these skills in our students, but also track them through regular formative assessment. An example of this is we could do role plays, and this also asking students to, right, as you take on the role of a healthcare scientist communicating with a patient, how do you professionally introduce yourself? And how's that difference to if you're a healthcare scientist communicating with a peer from a different department? How do you professionally introduce yourself? These were areas that students performed. Professional introduction was areas that students didn't do so well in some previous ESP series. But they were going beyond that. Active listening, body language, manners, how this may vary for people from different cultures and being respectful of that. This goes beyond just, we can think about the ESP and we can think about having mocks, and this goes beyond just having mocks. Mocks do have their value, but having role play and having professional discussions can go beyond that to help support our students. So for example, you could ask a student to prepare an area of the core content and present that aimed at different audiences. So how would you present an area of, like, for example, we could work on physics concepts here for Florence. How could you present that to a patient? How would you present that to a peer? How would you present that to a child? Really getting her to think and understand, to think about through her understanding of these different concepts and then how she can communicate that. But also incorporate mini group discussions and observe how can students communicate with one another. Take this even further and get them to reflect on their own skills and also give peer feedback to others.
So how do we make Florence an independent learner? So one of the key areas of development for an independent learner is that metacognition. So STEM learning has some really great resources in CPD around developing metacognitive skills in your students. In simple terms, metacognition is the ability of a student to monitor, direct, and review their own learning. Using strategies such as exam wrappers, personal learning, checklists, to really increase that self-regulated learning, to make that independent learner and make them stronger, independent learners. This is done by students identifying their own individual areas of strengths and weaknesses to help support and guide further study. Getting students to reflect on the adequacy of their preparation time, the appropriateness of the study strategy they've picked, and characterising the nature of the errors to find any recurring patterns that could be addressed. Moving now on to creating a critical thinker. So problem-based learning is a really key area that really helps develop those higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy to get students solving problems and using knowledge in real-world application. It's moving into that real-world application and shifting into that inquiry-based learning. So we really want to get those top 3 levels of Bloom's, that higher order thinking skills, getting the critical analysis, problem solving, generalizing. This can be done through group discussions, peer tutoring, and cooperative learning, as this has been found a really effective way to develop HOTS. And it has been found in research that there is a correlation between effective problem-based learning and higher order thinking skills. So let's explore how to use problem-based learning in delivery. So first of all, in the process of problem-based learning, you pop your students in a group. You assign roles to the students. So group leader, timekeeper, note taker. You'll probably get your strongest, most probably verbal communicator to be the group leader the first time round. But in future, the more problem-based learning teaching strategies that you do, the more that you'll actually change those roles around to maybe build on the confidence of any students who are lower on that verbal communication. You present a problem or stimulus material to the student, so you can adapt that from the stimulus used in both Year 1 and Year 2 sample assessment materials. You would get the students to identify what the key problem is, so what support is needed, what is the standing operating procedure for, etc. Get students to mind map those ideas. What knowledge have they learned already? So what do they already know right off the bat, discussing it, that they can apply. You would then send them off with some independent study to review this further, to maybe do a little bit extra research, go back through some notes, to bring with them to a second meeting. In the second group meeting, they will whittle this problem down more, refine it, and give a clear solution or process. You would then get the students to then present this. So this is where your formative assessment will come in. You would get them to present it in groups or independently through presentations, essays. You could align this with the same sort of assessment method as synoptic assessments. And finally, it's a really important part of the problem-based learning for the students to discuss this through peer discussion, feedback, and reflection. And that brings that, it sort of links that back to those metacognitive skills again, really analysing what they did well through procedure, as well as what they knew and what they didn't know. So let's look at how we can now create an evidence-based researcher. So evidence-based practice has been a really key area in sort of medicine. It's been really explored through nursing and healthcare practice. So evidence-based evaluation and conclusions are a really important step in reaching those higher order thinking skills. And evidence-based practice is very common strategy to do this. It's the synergy between using clinical experience. So for your students, this would be in placement, in skill sessions. It's about taking into account those patient values, needs, and also that good research evidence. So ABP has a 5-step process. You have step 1, ask. So this is the first step in evidence-based practice, which is to define your clinical question. You have access. This is when once you have a well-formulated clinical question, you can start searching the literature. Appraise. So this is when you've located your relevant literature, you now need to critically appraise the evidence. And there are many different types of study designs which would affect how you would appraise the individual studies and thus the weight you give each study. And this is commonly represented in what is known as the level of evidence hierarchy. You have apply in step 4, which is the key elements of that evidence-based practice, which was mentioned earlier. So this is applying those 3 key areas of best research, clinical experience and patient values, and then applying studies they have found in practice. And it's really important to do that in the context of those elements. And finally, you have audit. So once you've implemented your evidence-based practice, you need to audit and evaluate to see if it was effective. Some key factors to take into account with evidence-based practice. It must happen in a clinical setting as often as possible and is over a long period of time. So for your students over that 2-year period, this will occur in their sim sessions generally, but students will have reflective diaries, placement diary logs, and they can use them to draw on the relevant skill experience. It should be active, online. You need to be able to engage students both in the classroom, but also independently, so online or through flipped learning. And at the beginning of every scenario, so before that 5-step process, students should recognise what they don't know first and then reflect on this continuously. So let's explore an example in healthcare science. So on the right-hand side, it gives you some more details of ABP and it gives it a bit more detail. So evidence from research can come from theories, clinical experts, opinion leaders, evidence from assessments from that patient history, physical, clinical sort of resources. Then you've got your clinical experience and you have your patient preferences and values. So how can we contextualize that in more detail? So on the left, we have a key decision to make. What can you do to support a patient that requires assessment of cardiac physiology following an injury? So we have the evidence. So what evidence can you find to support diagnostics? Evidence from patient history in this case would be sort of your healthcare plan, referrals from specialists. And you've got your case study, your ECG, which sort of builds on that medical history, but also should have that information about the patient's preferences as values alongside that healthcare plan. And then that clinical experience. So what experience do you have that then can be applied to this scenario to solve this problem?
But 10 years later, Florence has taken the steps, successfully completed the T-level, gone through university, and now works for the NHS as a healthcare science practitioner in the field of neurophysiology. Here are some examples of the detail of the NHS of what the roles require and where we'll be getting sort of this information for Florence's life. So in her daily life, she conducts clinical tests of patients to aid in the diagnosis of neurophysiological conditions, for example, epilepsy and stroke. So these tests include EEGs, electroencephalography, evoked potentials, electromyography, so EMGs, and nerve conduction studies. Things that she enjoys about her work are the collaborative nature of the role. She gets to work with a variety of other healthcare professionals with different specialisms and with the unified goal of best supporting patients. But coming up through the T-level, what are the skills that Florence uses in her current role? Well, the requirements are to have excellent communication skills, managing the wide range of relationships with colleagues, so colleagues from different departments, different levels of experience, patients and patient families. Emotional resilience and calm temperament, the ability to work well under pressure. Teamwork and the capacity to lead multidisciplinary teams. To bring in a lot of here highlighting those communication skills and communication to different audiences, as well as working with others. Also problem solving and diagnostic skills, improving her critical thinking ability. Outstanding organization and effective decision-making skills. And then time and resource management for the benefit of patients. So here we've seen Florence throughout her journey from being a T-level student all the way up to being a practitioner. And this is helpful to understand how we can best support her in getting to her career goals and to her destination. But this is also a useful activity for you to conduct with your students, so they can see how the skills that they are learning now will not only help them succeed in the T-level, secure a place at a career university, but also help them be effective in their roles later on. So I hope you've enjoyed this session and thank you very much for watching.